Be me, 25. For the sake of the story, call me Rowan. I'm a butch lesbian, always have been. Not the soft, butch kind either. Short hair, men's clothes, the whole 9 yards. Most people assume I'm a dude from a distance. This is important for later. For years, my entire dating life has been within the lesbian community. And honestly, I was burned out. It felt like every relationship was a goddamn thesis defense on feelings. Every minor disagreement spiraled into a 4-hour conversation about our childhood traumas. Every text message was analyzed for its subtext, its tone, the number of emojis used. I was tired of the drama, the constant emotional scorekeeping, the feeling that you had to be a mind reader to survive. My last girlfriend broke up with me because I didn't validate her emotional reality when she was upset that her favorite character in a TV show made a bad decision. I'm not even kidding. That was the final straw. I just wanted something simpler. I'd see my straight friends, guys I worked with, and their relationships seemed so straightforward. The dynamic was clear. Man provides, protects, is the rock. Woman is nurturing, supportive, appreciative. Of course, I knew that was a stereotype, but from the outside, it looked a hell of a lot less exhausting. I was venting about this to my best friend, Kira, over cheap beer one night. She's also a lesbian, but way more cynical than me. I told her I was done. Done with the scene, the mind games, everything. I said if I were a guy, I could just be myself. Be strong, be dependable, and a woman would appreciate that. It would be simple. She just laughed in my face. She told me I was romanticizing a reality I knew nothing about, that I had no clue what it was actually like for an average guy out there. She said I wouldn't last a week. That conversation stuck with me. It was like a challenge. What if she was wrong? What if I was right? What if I could just become a guy? Not for real, not in a trans way. Just on the surface, just to see. The idea took root. It wasn't an experiment in my head. It was a genuine, desperate plan to find a different kind of connection. I already had the look, mostly. The next day, I went all in, got my hair cut even shorter, faded on the sides, ordered a high-compression binder online, the kind that makes your chest completely flat. Went to a department store and bought a whole new wardrobe from the men's section. Jeans that fit right, plain t-shirts, a couple of decent button-downs, a solid-looking jacket. I looked in the mirror when I was done. It was me, but it wasn't. The outline was masculine. I called myself Reese. It sounded solid. The transformation was complete on the outside. Now for the hard part. I downloaded Tinder and Hinge, created a new profile for Reese, age 26, picked the most masculine-looking photos I could find of myself. One smiling, one looking away thoughtfully, one with a dog I borrowed from a neighbor. The classic playbook. Bio was simple. Barista, love hiking and old movies, looking for something real, no drama. The irony of that last part wasn't lost on me. I set my preference to women. And then I started swiping. The first few weeks were a wasteland, utter silence. I spent hours every night swiping right on anyone who seemed remotely normal and interesting. Hundreds of profiles, maybe thousands. The result? Nothing. Not a single match. It was a feeling I'd never experienced before. Complete and total invisibility. As a butch woman in the lesbian community, I always got attention. Maybe not always the kind I wanted, but I was visible. This was different. This was like shouting into a void. My ego, which I thought was pretty solid, took a massive hit. I started to think maybe Kira was right. Around the 1-month mark, I got my first match. I was so excited, I almost dropped my phone. Her name was something generic, like Jessica. Profile was full of selfies with the dog filter. I crafted a careful opening message, commented on something in her bio, asked an open-ended question. She replied 6 hours later. with LOL. That was it. I tried to keep the conversation going, asked her how her week was. Another few hours later, I got a good. It was like trying to get blood from a stone. I felt like I was performing a one-man show for an audience of one who couldn't care less. After 2 days of this, I checked the app and she had unmatched me. No reason, no goodbye, just gone. That became the pattern. The rare match I did get would either never reply, or the conversation would be a soul-crushing exercise in futility. I was the one asking all the questions, putting in all the effort, trying to be engaging and funny. The replies, when they came, were one-word answers. It was like they were doing me a massive favor by even gracing me with their time. Then came the first date. It was maybe month 2 of this whole thing. I matched with a girl who actually seemed to hold a conversation. We texted for a few days and agreed to meet for coffee. I was nervous, but hopeful. I got there 10 minutes early, picked a good table. She showed up 25 minutes late. Didn't apologize. She looked different from her photos. Heavily filtered, I guess. She barely made eye contact. The entire 30 minutes we were there, she talked about her toxic ex-boyfriend and how all men are trash. I just sat there, nodding. What else could I do? I paid for her ridiculously complicated latte and my own black coffee. The bill was like $15. She said, "Thanks for the coffee," and walked away, already on her phone. Never heard from her again. Date number 2 was a week later, a girl from Hinge. This one was more direct. We sat down, and the first things out of her mouth were, "So how tall are you?" and "What do you do for a living?" I told her my height, which is average, maybe a bit on the shorter side for a guy. Then I told her I was a barista. I watched her face change. The polite smile became strained. The light in her eyes just dimmed. The rest of the date was her checking her watch and giving me bored looks. I paid the bill. She gave me a weak, "nice to meet you," and practically ran out of the restaurant. The financial cost was starting to add up. I wasn't rich. Every coffee, every dinner, every beer was coming out of my pocket. There was never an offer to split, never a "let me get this one." It was just expected. I was the guy, so I paid. I felt less like a potential partner and more like a walking wallet and a free source of validation. I went on a few more dates like that. One girl spent the entire time texting her friends. I could see her screen. They were making fun of my shirt. Another one showed up and flat out told me I didn't look like my pictures and that she was disappointed. The constant rejection, the ghosting, the feeling of being judged and dismissed in the first 5 seconds. It was brutal. It wasn't just my ego that was bruised anymore. I was starting to feel this deep, gnawing loneliness. I was putting myself out there, trying to be genuine and kind, and the world was telling me I wasn't good enough. Not tall enough, not rich enough, not interesting enough. All my old theories about how simple it was for men felt like a sick joke. I complained to Kira on the phone one night. I told her it was a nightmare. She was quiet for a moment, and then just said, "Welcome to the party, pal." There was no "I told you so" in her voice, just a tired kind of sympathy. I was at my breaking point, almost 3 months in. I was exhausted, broke, and more alone than I'd ever been. I decided to give it one more week. If nothing changed, I was deleting the apps, burning the men's clothes, and accepting my fate as a lonely cat lady. I was swiping mindlessly on a Tuesday night. Left, left, left. Another filtered selfie. Left. Another bio that just said, "Ask me." Left. Then I saw her profile. Lyra. Her photos were different. They were normal. One of her smiling in a park. One of her reading a book. One of her laughing with what looked like her family. She wasn't overly made up. She looked real. Her bio was short and sweet. Something about loving rainy days in old bookstores. I swiped right, not expecting anything. My thumb was just going through the motions. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It's a match. And then another notification almost immediately after. A message from her. She had messaged first. I stared at the screen for a full minute just to make sure it was real. Her message wasn't just hey. She mentioned the bookstore part of my bio and asked what my favorite classic novel was. We started talking, and it was easy. The conversation flowed. She was funny, intelligent, and asked me questions about myself. She seemed genuinely interested in my answers. It felt like a drink of water after crawling through a desert. We texted back and forth for a few days. No games, no waiting hours to reply, just a real conversation. We agreed to meet for dinner that Friday. I was more nervous for this date than for all the others combined. It felt like my last shot. I picked a quiet Italian place. Not too expensive, but nice. I got there early, heart pounding in my chest. She walked in, and she looked exactly like her pictures, maybe even better. She smiled when she saw me, a real, genuine smile. The date was perfect. We talked for 3 hours, but it felt like 30 minutes. We talked about everything and nothing. Books, movies, dreams, stupid childhood memories. She laughed at my dumb jokes. She listened intently when I talked about my passion for coffee. She didn't once look at her phone. When the check came, I reached for my wallet, and she immediately reached for her purse. She said she'd love to split it. I was so shocked, I just stared at her for a second. I insisted on paying, out of habit now, but the gesture itself meant the world to me. I walked her to her car afterwards. I was expecting an awkward goodbye, maybe a side hug if I was lucky. But she turned to me and said she had an amazing time and would love to do it again soon. The next day, she texted me, saying she hadn't stopped thinking about our conversation. We went on a second date, a third. Everything was incredible. She was affectionate, supportive, kind. She seemed to appreciate the little things I did. Opening a door for her, bringing her coffee in the morning. She told me she was tired of guys who played games. She wanted someone stable and dependable, someone like me. I felt like I was floating. This was it. This was everything I had been looking for. The simplicity, the clear appreciation, the lack of drama. I had done it. I had cracked the code. I saw Kira for the first time in over a month. I was beaming. I told her all about Lyra, how perfect she was, how amazing our relationship felt. I told her, see? I knew it could be like this. I just had to be a guy to find it. Kira listened to my whole gushing monologue. She took a long sip of her beer. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's only been a month, Reese. The tutorial level is always easy." I laughed it off. She was just being cynical, as usual. She couldn't see what I saw. She couldn't feel what I felt. I was finally happy. I had no idea I had just walked straight into a different kind of trap. A much, much worse one. The next couple of months were, on the surface, the happiest of my life. Lyra was everything I thought I wanted. We spent all our time together. We'd go for long walks, cook dinner together, watch old movies. She was beautiful and charming, and she made me feel like the most important person in the world. My friends from the lesbian community had all but disappeared from my life. It was a conscious choice. I was Reese now, and Reese wouldn't have those friends. Kira was the only one I kept in touch with, mostly through texts. She'd ask how things were. I'd send back a thumbs-up emoji. I was living the simple life I'd craved. The first crack in the perfect facade was small. So small I barely noticed it. We were out to dinner, and when the bill came, she made a show of patting her pockets and her purse. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Reese. I think I left my wallet at home." "No big deal. I paid. It's what a guy does, right?" A week later, her phone screen cracked. She was devastated. She said she couldn't afford to fix it for at least a month because of her bills. I watched her look at her shattered screen with tears in her eyes. I felt that protective instinct kick in, the one I thought was the cornerstone of being a good man. I told her not to worry about it. The next day, I took her phone and paid to have the screen replaced. She was so grateful. She hugged me and called me her hero. It felt good, really good. Then it was something else. She was a little short on rent, just $100. Could I help her out? Of course. Then she wanted to take this online course to help her career. It was a few hundred. She promised she'd pay me back. I was working extra shifts at the coffee shop. I was tired all the time, but I told myself it was worth it. I was providing. I was being the rock she needed. The pay me back never happened, of course. If I ever gently brought it up, she'd get this hurt look on her face, as if I had accused her of something terrible. She'd say things like, "I thought we were a team. I didn't realize you were keeping a spreadsheet of everything." It made me feel like an asshole, so I dropped it. The financial drain was one thing. The emotional one was something else entirely. My life became entirely about managing her feelings. If she had a bad day at work, my evening was canceled. I had to sit there for hours, listening to her vent about her horrible boss or her annoying coworker. I had to offer advice, but not too much advice, because that was mansplaining. I had to just listen and validate everything she said. Wow, that sounds so hard. You're right, that's completely unfair. Her problems, no matter how small, were treated like world-ending catastrophes that required my full, undivided attention. My problems, on the other hand, did not exist. I remember one day I had a truly awful shift. A customer screamed at me. My manager blamed me for something that wasn't my fault, and I spilled a whole tray of hot drinks on myself. I came home feeling defeated and just wanted to talk about it for 5 minutes. I started to tell her what happened. She held up a hand and cut me off. "Babe, can we not? I'm trying to stay positive, and your energy is really bringing me down. I had a pretty stressful day myself." Her stressful day was that her favorite lunch spot had run out of avocado. I just shut my mouth. That became the unspoken rule of our relationship. Her emotions were valid and important. Mine were an inconvenience. She wanted a rock, and rocks don't have bad days. The isolation started to creep in. It wasn't that she forbade me from seeing people. It was more subtle than that. If I ever mentioned texting Kira, she'd pout and say, "Oh, I thought we were going to spend time together tonight." She'd make me feel guilty for having any kind of life outside of her. So I stopped. I stopped texting Kira. I stopped thinking about anyone but her. My entire world shrank until it was just my apartment, the coffee shop, and her. And I was so tired. The binder was physically painful. I wore it for 12, 14 hours a day. My ribs ached constantly. I had trouble taking deep breaths, but taking it off felt like a failure. It was the armor for my role as Reese. I was living a lie, and the lie was crushing me from the inside out and the outside in. The person I was pretending to be was a provider, a protector, an emotional punching bag, and a therapist. The person I actually was, Rowan, was disappearing. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I looked in the mirror one morning and saw a stranger. Hollow eyes, slumped shoulders. The confident, strong person I used to be was gone. In her place was this exhausted shell of a man. The breaking point came on a cold evening in what must have been the 6th month of this whole charade. I had a dog, an old golden retriever named Buddy. I'd had him since he was a puppy. For 14 years, he was my most constant companion. He was old and had been sick for a while. The vet told me it was time. That afternoon, I held him in my arms as he was put to sleep. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I came home, and my entire apartment felt empty and silent. The silence was deafening. I was shattered. A piece of my life, a piece of me, was gone. Lyra came over that evening. She knew what had happened. She saw me sitting on the couch, just staring at the wall. She gave me a quick, awkward pat on the shoulder. "I'm sorry about your dog," she said, in the same tone you'd use if someone told you they'd lost their car keys. She then immediately started talking about her day, about some drama with one of her friends. I wasn't listening. I couldn't. The grief was a physical weight in my chest. After a few minutes, she noticed I wasn't responding. She got annoyed. "Are you even listening to me, Reese?" I looked at her, and for the first time the dam just broke. My eyes filled with tears. I started to cry. Not loudly, just silent tears rolling down my face. I couldn't stop them. I tried to tell her how much he meant to me, how empty the apartment felt, how much it hurt. Lyra's face, which had been annoyed, slowly morphed into a look of pure disgust. She recoiled from me, like I was something unclean. She stood up. "What is wrong with you? It was just a dog." I just stared at her, unable to speak. She wasn't done. "I can't do this. I can't be with someone who is this weak. Men aren't supposed to cry like this, especially not over an animal. I need a man who is strong. You're just pathetic." That one word, pathetic. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. The grief, the exhaustion, the pain, it all vanished. In its place was a sudden, ice-cold clarity. I saw her. I saw the whole relationship. I saw the past 6 months for what they truly were. It wasn't a partnership. It was a transaction. I provided money, stability, and emotional support. In return, I got her affection, as long as I performed my role correctly. The moment I showed a real, human vulnerability, the moment I needed something from her, the deal was off. I had broken the terms of service. I stopped crying. I slowly stood up from the couch. I walked into the bedroom, packed a small bag with my essentials, my wallet, my keys, my actual clothes that were stuffed in the back of the closet. I walked back out into the living room. She was standing there with her arms crossed, expecting me to apologize, to beg her to stay. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her, opened the front door, and left. I didn't tell her the truth. I didn't tell her I was a woman. It didn't matter anymore. My identity was irrelevant to the lesson I had just learned. I went to a cheap motel for the night. The next day, I blocked her number. I deleted every photo, every message. I went home, threw out every piece of men's clothing. I took off the binder, and it felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. But the relief was temporary. A deep, heavy depression settled over me. It was a depression born from a profound disillusionment. I had started this journey to prove that a man's world was simpler, that his role was respected. I had learned that it was simple, but in the worst way possible. A week later, Kira came over. I hadn't answered her texts, so she just showed up. She found me sitting in the dark, on the same couch where it had all ended. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just sat with me in the silence. After a long time, she asked me what I learned. I looked at her, and the words just came out. I thought men had it easy. I thought they were privileged. I took a breath. They're not. They're just useful. You're not valued for who you are. You're valued for what you provide. Your money, your strength, your ability to solve problems and absorb pain. The moment you stop providing, or the moment you show that you're human and you're hurting, you're worthless. You're not a partner. You're a utility. And when a utility breaks, you just replace it. Kira just nodded slowly. For the first time ever, my cynical, sarcastic best friend had nothing to say. And I just sat there, in my empty apartment, a woman who had finally understood what it was like to be a man, and it was the loneliest feeling in the world.